Today, I'm going to be talking about why it's so important to connect with the children that come into our care and their parents. I think we all have this ability and this skill to connect with our parents and children because that's why we're coaches. It's just ingrained in us, it's a part of us, and we already know the importance of it. And sometimes it's important to remember that building these connections within the sessions doesn't just end when the sessions are finished. I've built so many amazing relationships with my parents and their children that have gone beyond the Maxi Mind sessions. So much so that I'm being invited to birthday parties, baptisms for other children, all kinds of stuff, going to Rib Fest, hanging out with them. It's really, really nice to feel a part of the family because of the connections that I built. And it might not be the same for every child that I work with, but there are ones that kind of need that extra support once the sessions are finished. So today, just talking about building rapport and creating that positive and safe learning space, we know that those are two crucial components of being a Maxi Mind coach. And it's my goal today just to help you learn some new ways of building trust and rapport with your current and future parents and children. So speaking of our children, it's important to know that our children learn and grow so rapidly, especially in their early years. At 3 years old, their brain is developed by 80% and 90% developed by the age of 5. So what I like to say is, have you ever heard the phrase, children are like little sponges? I know we all have, and we've probably said it a time or two. So that is 100% true. Young children are continuously absorbing information around them, and they're actively trying to make sense of it. So the cool thing about this and them being little sponges is they don't only learn through their environment, but they're also learning through their interactions with everybody, and having those crucial roles like parents, teachers, caregivers, relatives, Maxi Mind coaches. All of that relationship building contributes to their learning journey. And the way that you build rapport can actually affect how well they continue to learn as they go on in school, as they build other relationships with other people, as they grow up. And the better quality of rapport that you have, the more effective their learning becomes in the future. So this was my fun little graphic of their brains being like sponges. And as you can see, the environment, their interactions, and everything that they're observing around them is all being soaked up. So when we talk about rapport, we're often reminded that the importance of a good relationship in life, and the cornerstone of having a good relationship is starting with that good connection. You obviously want to have a connection with the person you're forming a relationship with, and building rapport generally means to build that connection. Developing a good and meaningful connection with your Maxi Mind clients can actually boost the child's overall well-being. They can and they will look to you as a secure person in their life that they could come to when they face challenges or difficulties. They could speak to you when they're feeling low. They're going to learn new skills from you. And you're someone that they could just be themselves around without judgment. And that to me sounds like an amazing relationship. All children, regardless of their age, they grow and thrive in the context of close and dependable relationships. So regardless of any of those social impacts in their life, when they come to you, they know that they're going to thrive by being in a relationship with you because you're going to provide that love, that nurturing, and have really responsive interactions with them. And by building these strong connections with the children in our care, we're actually promoting motivation and cooperation. And we know that those skills are so important for effective learning. So developing that good rapport with your clients is one of the essential foundations that we use to determine what your relationship will be like with one another. Ultimately, it depends on the type of rapport you have with them, and it will impact the effectiveness of your therapy. if you think about it, if there's not a strong connection or the rapport building hasn't been done right from the first session, we're probably going to be introduced to more defiant behaviors, and it might lead to more unmotivated clients. So it's as important as it is essential to start building rapport right away. And developing this relationship with your clients is personal and individualized. It's going to be different for every single child that you meet. Depending on your child's age, personality, and needs, you might need to adjust your approach. So I personally like to start out by meeting with my clients beforehand, or doing a quick phone conversation with the parents and with the children to see what their likes are, what their dislikes are. I want to pick up on personality traits. I want to pick up on some target behaviors that the parents want to work out through their session. And this helps me develop appropriate strategies before the session starts, so that when I am building rapport, it is a little bit easier because I already know what I'm going to talk about with them. So what I like to do is use this really quick reinforcement survey. I send it out to my parents just to get some preliminary information about the children. I like to know their likes, their hobbies, their habits. What are they into? What is it that interests them, so that I can use this as talking points, and I could also build in some of the activities that they like into our session, just to make them more comfortable right from the get-go. I usually send this a week before so that I could reflect on the feedback. I could pick the most appropriate strategies and activities for them. And when I'm talking about strategies, it's usually from a phone call. The parents will let me know, what are those target behaviors, whether it's organization, time management, stuff like that, that I can help pick strategies for, that we could build on together, the parents and I, and incorporate the child into those new learning goals that are going to be outside of Maxi Mind. So we have our sessions inside, we pick our goals, but it doesn't just stop there. We're also helping them in their home life as well, in their school life. So making sure that we pick the right strategies based on knowing this information is so important. And regardless of their age, the children just love bonding with other people. So they're really, really interested in telling you what they like. And it's good to use that information to build that rapport quickly, because you could just easily be like, hey, I remember that they love the Toronto Maple Leafs, so I'm going to make sure I ask them what the score was on the last game. So incorporating their interest into the session, you want to do that as much as you can. Whether I said it's like talking about their favorite sport, or maybe building Lego structures at the end of the session because they love to build. It's small moments like this that help build that rapport and gain trust. So how do we help build this rapport? And I want to note that building rapport doesn't just stop. There's no peak to reach when it comes to building rapport. And that's because with each interaction that we have, we open up new doors of understanding and learning about each other. The connections continue to get deeper and more meaningful every interaction we have. And that in itself is such a powerful thing. That's why I believe it's so important to be present in each and every session, and to look at each session as an opportunity to strengthen not only the learning goals that you've developed for the child, but also as an opportunity to further develop your relationship with them. Each day unlocks new potentials and opportunities, and each interaction continues to create new opportunities. And that's going to help maximize their optimal growth and development in the program and in life as well. So here are some ideas that are going to help build rapport. We want to start with open body language. That's maintaining really good eye contact, sitting closely or in proximity with them. I personally like to sit on the floor with them. I get on their level, whether we're playing a game. It just feels natural. It feels nice to be able to be on their level and just kind of mimic what they're doing. So obviously we want to show a genuine interest in what they have to say. Sometimes just letting them talk and not cutting them off is a great way to start your program. It helps them build trust in you, but it also lets them just kind of air out everything that they need to air out. And with that being said, we do know that some of our clients like to talk and talk and talk and talk, just like me. So sometimes I like to set a timer if I know that child in particular is very chatty. so that we could set the expectation that when the timer's finished, we're going to move on, get into our programming. And this over time will help them filter their thoughts and ideas with what they want to share with you, because they're going to realize, oh my gosh, I have so much I want to talk to her about, but I only have this 5 minutes, so I should pick the most important things to talk about first, not, X, Y, and Z. So building that in, whether you have a timer on your phone or a visual timer, is a really good strategy as well that you can use throughout the session, not just in this situation. And obviously doing all of this, practicing your active listening, will make them feel more comfortable in seeing you, and they know how their session is going to start. And that is a powerful thing, because obviously not every day is going to be a good day or, a good day. They're going to have those bad days. They're going to come in feeling sad, frustrated, defeated. Creating that space and that chiseling out that time to be able to just sit and talk with one another can make them more open to the process of sharing their feelings. So with saying that, we want to follow their lead. So of course, when we talk about following their lead, we talk about, listening to their interests, having them lead the conversation. And if they're not motivated to talk, try choosing a toy or a game or activity, using that survey to see what they like to do. Try to build that in. That most times when they come in really quiet, just giving them an activity of their choice that they love will help melt away any tension and awkwardness and help facilitate a conversation. You can build your conversation on the activity and eventually branch out and talk about other things. And you might be surprised. They might end up opening up to you. And if they don't, that's okay as well. They're just not ready. And we want to make sure that children are making the most of their sessions, but valuing extended discussions and the more relaxed moments will help you develop a deeper connection with them. And you really get to know who they are, which is such a beautiful thing. So next, we want to ask questions. Don't assume. If a child is displaying a certain behavior, maybe they're angry or frustrated, take the time to ask them if they are okay. It might sound obvious, but allowing them the time to discuss what's on their mind can really make them feel valued. If they're having a hard time articulating how they're feeling, ask them to draw it out instead. Creative expression can help facilitate the conversation as well. Try not to make assumptions about what it is or the significance of it, whatever it may be. Their feelings are very important and should be respected, but we don't need to have the answer to everything, and we don't need to provide them advice on that problem, but we want to offer solutions instead. How can we make them feel better in this moment? Because not everything can be tackled all at once. And they'll appreciate the fact that you're interested and care about their feelings. And valuing this time and trust, they're showing you by opening up to you, right? Always ask, because you might be surprised by what you hear. My favorite thing to get, a compliment, very easy to give out as well. And everyone, absolutely everybody, loves to receive a compliment and positive feedback. So being overly positive about their behavior, their work ethic, their attention, their focus can help motivate your children to continue what they are receiving their praise on. We want to reinforce those positive behaviors, that positive work ethic, to help keep that motivation going so that they'll want to keep doing it over and over and over again, knowing that it makes you happy. And it feels really good to get that praise in return. So next, we want to make sure that honesty is the policy. I think it's important to be open with my clients and let them know that sometimes there's going to be difficult days. There's going to be activities that might be too hard in that moment, and they're going to feel frustrated or they're going to feel defeated and feel like they're not progressing, but letting them know that together, this partnership, you're going to work to find the right level to keep them challenged and progress their skills. I personally call this my level up strategy. My kids love it because it's kind of a video game reference, and they know that reaching that next level is important. They also love working hard and knowing that they're going to reach that goal, that next level. And when they do, I make sure to reward them, whether it's a sticker on their chart, extra board game time, or maybe they've been working on this certain skill for a while and they finally nailed it. So I'll let them pick a little small trinket from my prize bin. That keeps building the motivation, and that's super important to have. But I also think it's equally important to show that your client that you're not perfect either, and you're not expecting perfection. That's a valuable lesson that I always like to incorporate into my sessions when the time is right. You want to model something and make a mistake when you're doing it. That when you make those mistakes, you can easily create a sense of ease just by laughing it off, letting them know, I made a mistake, but I'm going to keep trying, because if I keep trying, eventually I'm going to get it. And when I get it, I'm going to feel really, really good. So doing that, you could also give them the opportunity to be the expert or the teacher. You can ask them, oh, I did this wrong. Can you show me how to do it? I know you're so good at this. Show me how you bounce that ball in this way, X, Y, Z. So giving them that opportunity helps build that connection, and it makes them feel valuable, right? It shows them that being vulnerable is okay. And together, this partnership that you've built is going to take them a long way. And trusting them in that moment to be vulnerable is really important as well. So with saying that, when things can be a little bit too much, we want to start at a level where our clients can experience success. And we want to slowly build on that. So if your very first interaction, if you start with a task that they aren't good at or they're extremely frustrated by, you might completely turn them off to wanting to work with you. They might feel that it's too challenging. We're going to get that defiant behavior, and it's going to take a little bit more time to kind of turn them around to liking these activities. We don't want them to feel embarrassed. We don't want them to feel overly vulnerable or uncomfortable, especially when they don't know you yet. So starting small when you're first getting started is important as well. And I like to start my session in a more fun and inclusive way. I always invite the parents in the very first session. Together, we talk about goals, we talk about the likes and the hobbies. And when we're talking about goals, it's important to explain what the purpose of the goal is, why we're picking these certain skills, why they're important, and how we're going to reach them. And when we reach them, why is it going to benefit them? After talking with the parents and inviting them in, I love working with the child and the parent together. So how I personally like to do it is I will pick a personal goal, a coach goal, based on their profile that we receive, whether it's self-regulation, we want to focus, if it's focus and attention, all those skills that they need to develop and why they're coming with us. Pick one thing to focus on. So that way, when they master it, they can move on to another goal that you've set for them. But I also think it's important for the child to come up with a goal for themselves as well, and for the parent to come up with a goal as well. When the parent comes up with a goal, you basically build that partnership with them, and you have opportunities to talk to them about the goals and see what they're working on and offer those strategies at home. So you kind of build this like triangle relationship where you're in constant communication with each other. And that's super important as well. That'll keep building motivation, especially when the child knows, hey, I can't just slack off at home, because Miss Caitlin's going to be on it. She knows. So generally when my client first comes in, I like to put all the equipment out and see what the child gravitates to. I think curiosity and question asking is so important, and answering those questions for them help build rapport really, really quickly. I see what they gravitate to, and then I offer explanations to what each item is, why it's important, how we're going to use it. I ask them to show me what they think they could do with this object, whether it's the bean bag or the bouncy balls or the pendulum ball. I'm curious to know, what could you do with it? What would you do with it? And oftentimes, they come up with something really funny or goofy, or just throwing the bean bag up in the air. And I mean, that's what we're doing, but we're teaching them in a more structured way. So really praising them and letting them know, yeah, we totally do throw it up in the air, but I'm going to show you an even better way to do it. helps build that curiosity. And then they're kind of like, ooh, I wonder what I'm going to do. Like, Mom, did you see? Like, I'm going to be doing this. It builds the connection really fast. And it's also nice for the parents to be involved to see what kind of materials you're going to be using, what the structure is going to be. So that way, when you're connecting with them, they kind of know what you're hinting to with the materials. And that's a really, really fun way to connect with the child. And also just seeing where they're at with the materials, you just get to see where they're at in their growth and fine motor skills, right? We're kind of creating that baseline level of, oh, they have a hard time throwing this beanbag. Let's use the largest one possible so that we can start building those throwing and catching skills quickly. And also you kind of see where their level of concentration and focus is, right? Those listening skills are so important in a session. And I like to think and monitor, are they able to follow my directions? Or do I need cues? Do I need visual prompts as well to help facilitate those listening skills? Next, we want to value their opinions and preferences. So we get to know that through that survey or those conversations before a session. And even in session, if the child brings up something that is new to me, new information to me, I just found out they love Ninja Turtles, I'm writing that down, making sure I can hit those points at a later time. Letting your client choose activities as well allows them to feel a sense of control during the session as well. So this can show them that you care about their opinions and obviously their preferences, and letting them choose, just like letting them talk for that little bit of time. Setting a timer on those are important because it helps build structure and schedule. And sometimes I like to build in an actual schedule so that they can see what my expectations are for the session. And establishing your expectations early in your session will help with consistency and predictability. And those are so important. Having a safe, consistent, and predictable environment helps build rapport. So this is an example of my schedule. And the schedule obviously is pretty general. You could change it up as need be. You can obviously put your choice activity in between, in the middle, or at the beginning, wherever it's appropriate. This generally for me would be my structure of it. And obviously we're building the expectations of our session, right? We're coming in, we're going to do that check-in with one another. That's going to help them feel valued. But also following the schedule is going to allow them to take ownership and lead to a greater level of compliance. And we want compliance for sure. So I always use the first 2 sessions with my parents and the second one with the child to develop the golden rules. So once you've established those golden rules, you can start incorporating them into your sessions as need be, and allowing that check-in with your parents too. So volume and tone of voice is really important as well. We obviously want to mirror the volume and tone of our children, especially for an older client. You don't want to be overly animated and if your client is, more shy and quiet. Maybe they're a little bit more reserved. So establishing that baseline for how your client is feeling by doing that check-in can help you navigate where your energy should be in the session. And sometimes too, starting a little bit more low energy, we can slowly ramp it up as the session goes on by praising them with a really enthusiastic personality that can help bring them and match your energy, right? Especially when they're feeling a little bit lower. So I talked about that check-in in our schedule. So I'm going to show you an example of the check-ins that I use. And I have 2 different types of check-in. So my first check-in would be more of like the zones of regulation. It's a picture. It's pretty easy. They can pick, choose what zone they're in, what emotion they're feeling. And this is really good for children who are very visual, but also very verbal. So for children that are less verbal, or maybe more shy or just a little bit more reserved. They need some more. It takes a little bit for them to warm up in the first couple minutes. I call them my slow burners. I personally like to give them my iPad, and it has a little check-in system on it. So they take this little check-in system, they go to the chair or the carpet or wherever they want that little reflection time. And they could sit there, they could go through the check-in, and then when they're done, they bring it over to me. I look it over, see what they've marked down, and then I use that as my baseline for talking points. So this is an easily shared one. If anybody's interested, I can share that with you. I'm going to show you what it would look like. So this is, you can do it on a computer as well. It is totally adaptable for any technology. So I like to go right in here where it says zone, and it reinforces the zones of regulation. So ideally they would come in and they're sitting down, just say they're in the green zone. That's the preferred zone. They're all good to go. They're happy, focused, ready to rock and roll. They would go to the next page. They would now we dive into that associative expressions where, you know, they seeing if what they put in their zone is matching these feelings here. That's important, because if they're saying they're in the green zone and then they're putting this guy up here, it doesn't match. And personally for me, I would flag that we would need to do some, you know, recognizing emotions, feelings, activities, stuff like that. But ideally, we're going to pretend they got everything. So if they're coming in the green zone, they're happy. Maybe they're a little excited to start the session. Maybe they had a great day, and they're wanting to share that with you. And this is kind of nice because they get to let you know just briefly what they did in their day. So maybe they played a game, they went to school and talked to their teacher, and 99.9% of all my clients said they did something else. And usually that's, you know, they went on their iPad or something like that. So it's technology based with kids these days. And if they want to write it out, they have the opportunity to. So they could sit there and say, today I did a presentation for my Maxi friends. So it's a great opportunity. Once they hit submit, they bring it over to you and you can look through those talking points. And like I said, it's just a great, quick, easy way to give them that reflection time, but also be able to have that check-in with them. Okay, so the next point I like to talk about is consistency. Healthy relationships are built on consistency and being clear with your expectations and your boundaries. You want to provide that consistency throughout your interactions with each child, because that'll help boost the trust, and that's really, really vital for that rapport to flourish. Being consistent can be as simple as having the same behavior expectations for everyone. And also it includes what you're going to do, right? So you build consistency through offering those strategies, those check-ins, the schedules, right? These are your golden rules that you're going to follow. And it also helps when you see those negative behaviors. You're easily able to be consistent by going back to your rules and your expectations. We don't do that here. This is what we do here, right? And lastly, my favorite one, which we all do, I know we do, is just play and have fun, right? For a young child, just getting down on their level, sitting on the floor or bending down to talk to them, it shows them how much fun you could be. And being silly and animated and like really playing with them means so much to them. And that goes into my next slide, which is why playing is important. Playing is simple and effective, one of the quickest ways to build rapport. Sometimes people see it as like a frivolous activity, especially when we think that, you know, we're providing therapy. But if you think about it, playing is actually an essential part in all of our lives, right? Especially during childhood. That's when it means the most. Playing provides opportunities to optimize development and manage that toxic stress. We use role playing to promote imaginative skills, right? We use playing board games and figurines and dolls to develop fine motor skills. And we use games like hide and seek to develop physical and cognitive skills. So why wouldn't we incorporate playing into Maxi, right? And as Maxi advertises to parents and our clients, we will have them learn and focus through fun. So let's have fun, right? We should encourage and maximize the opportunities to play when we can, because playing creates an opportunity to teach. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to teach them new things, new skills. And as a Maxi Mind coach, I promote and encourage opportunities of playing by using board games and interactive activities, because I know that through this, I'm going to help them develop their fine motor skills, their problem solving skills, focus on attention, creative thinking, imagination, and ultimately the connection between the two of you. So playing with them is just such a fantastic way of getting to know them too. You're not only encouraging and strengthening these essential skills that I listed before while you're playing the game, but you're just allowing them to have fun, melts away any of that unneeded stress, or maybe those negative experiences that they had earlier in the day. And the key to having fun is to be engaging. You want to be engaging, you want to be creative, and you want to reward with activities instead of rewarding with expectations. You want to use their attention span to your advantage. It's generally short, especially when they're bursting with energy and they're easily distracted. So having them choose a game can help build those skills, right? We're going to lengthen the amount of time that they're able to concentrate on a task. And maybe if they're concentrating on their task, they will concentrate on your task as well. And you can build that in as talking points, right? You're doing such a good job. Did you know we played for 1 extra minute? Makes them feel good, right? So the choice of the games and the activities are important, but of course, obviously they need to be time limited. So not only does having fun promote learning opportunities, but it also helps to strengthen that connection with you. Many of our clients will still connect with me beyond the Maxi Mind sessions, which is so amazing. And that's beyond my role as a coach, right? They see me as a significant person in their life, someone that they trust, someone that they confide in, somebody who they know will push and motivate them, somebody that loves them, but is also going to challenge them to be their best. And all of these are successful and meaningful relationship building ways. It's through play, right? I just love to play and have fun with them. But sometimes children take longer to build rapport. And they do that because of this phenomenon called stranger anxiety. And research has actually shown that in babies who experience stranger anxiety, when they first meet you, or when they're left in the care of people that they're unfamiliar with, they experience this stranger anxiety. So we obviously have to take that into account, that meeting our clients for the first time, they're going to be feeling and experiencing this stranger anxiety. And if you think about it, as adults, we experience this as well, right? Could you imagine walking into a room full of people you've never met and they all just turn and look at you? You instantly kind of feel that, oof, that heaviness, right? And some of us might want to hightail it out of there, right? Our fight or flight kicks in and we just want to turn around and get out of there and go back to whatever it was we were doing that made us feel more comfortable. But the thing is, as adults, we stay. And we stay because we're there for a reason. We didn't just go, to this place for no reason. So just like our Maxi Mind clients, they came to us for a purpose, and they were guided by their parents, right? They were guided by their trusted caregivers. So the most important thing that we can do when we first meet our clients is to bond with that closest caregiver, right? Which is their parent. And the difference between us as adults walking into a room full of people that we don't know and feeling that anxiety, and a child walking into a room with a person that they don't know yet, is that we have already developed the appropriate social skills, right? To make ourselves more acquainted with strangers. Children take a little bit longer to do that. They haven't mastered the skill yet, and they're going to look to their trusted adult to guide them when a stranger is approaching them, right? That's their natural instinct, is to be cautious. So it's important to incorporate that parent into that first session so that the child can see the interactions, right? They're sponges. They're going to see how you interact with the parent. The parent likes you. They're going to put those walls down just a little bit quicker. And this just allows, an open and free-flowing environment. It gives the child that sense of curiosity, and that sense of curiosity will spark their play instincts. And sparking those play instincts are important because that's going to be your prime opportunity to build that rapport from the get-go, right? When you're communicating and engaging with them. Having their trusted adult in the room, having that parent down, will break down those walls and reservations that they had when they first entered. But it's also important to let them know that mom, dad, whoever it is, they're not going to stay for the full session. And that's because you're here to build a relationship with them, right? Explaining how those sessions work and what to expect can help ease the stranger anxiety, build those or break those walls down, and it makes the parents feel a sense of ease too, right? They know that you're a coach, they know that you're a professional, but they're going to feel more comfortable leaving the child in your care. So to get back to that timeline point, what I like to say and what I think is one of the biggest takeaways that I keep referencing is that first session is the most important session, right? That first session builds a baseline for you to build that rapport, and you're going to continue to build that rapport as the sessions continue. For the parent, the first session is enough for them to start trusting you. And after that's complete, they're going to feel comfortable dropping their child off and just leaving, right? And for the child, it could take at least 2 to 4 sessions after the initial session for them to start feeling comfortable. Some are quicker and they just come in, they're ready to go, they're very sociable. But for most, in my experience, it takes a little bit of time for them to open up. It takes a little bit of effort and, consistency. So I like to think that the first few sessions is when we should use those 10 rapport building steps that I mentioned earlier. And I'm going to send these all to you in case you need a refresher. It's a lot of talking. But it's those 10 examples, those 10 steps that can turn you from a stranger into a friend. And that's what we want to be. So we have to keep in mind that there's some variables that will influence building rapport. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly because we're actually going to touch on these at another time. But the first one would be age. And it's important to note the age because we have their chronological age, and then we also have their developmental age, right? And I'm going to touch more on the developmental age as in our next masterclass, because this particularly applies to children who have autism, children who have, those neurodiversities that affect them intellectually. So it's important to note that if they do have an intellectual disability, that they're going to function on a socially, physical, intellectual, different level, right? Emotionally as well. It might not match their chronological age. So we have to keep in mind where they're operating in that sense. And that just helps build activities. Obviously, you're not going to give a 13-year-old, a dinky little puzzle. They're going to look at you like, I don't want to do that. So being able to be aware of their age can help you pick those appropriate strategies for their age and also those activities, right? So we got to make sure that we keep that in mind always. And we always want to keep in mind their emotional state. That's why we do those check-ins, right? When you first have them come into you, you're going to be able to use those check-ins to kind of assess their level of compliance, right? Doing that check-in, if you get, all green, thumbs up, in the green zone, happy, then you kind of know that their compliance is going to be really high. But if they're tired, they're bored, they had a bad day, they're frustrated, we're going to have to work a little bit harder to make that level of compliance go up. And that goes right to their emotional state. It's important to understand their emotional maturity as well. If your client is chronologically older, but operates, emotionally lower, you may want to pick some strategies that match their level of understanding. And that might mean incorporating more visuals, right, for opportunities to encourage communication. And the biggest way of dealing with that is, I mentioned it earlier, when you're doing that check-in, if they're putting in the green zone, but then they're putting a mad face on the next slide, something's not matching, right? So you could use that as an area of opportunity to do more of that labeling activities so that they can understand their emotional state a little bit better. And lastly, we want to always be aware of disability. And like I said, we're going to build on that in the next one. But it's important to remember that everyone, regardless of disability, is unique. It's important to take the time and to understand the communication style of the person that you're interacting with, because communication is essential, and you want to make sure you optimize your efforts of communicating with them. For many individuals that have learning disabilities, it's important for those who are communicating to speak slowly, clearly, use that easy words and language so that they're really picking up on what you're putting down, right? Ensure that the environment's not distracting, because any elements of distraction can actually take away from communication, and we need that communication to build rapport, right? For example, I'm going to say, we all have, those fidget toys or those preferred activities. We want to make sure that they're only brought out when it's appropriate in our schedule to use them. If we keep all the fidget toys out and they come in and they're constantly in the bins and this, you're actually going to take time away from your session. And if we're speaking to consistency and following the schedule, we want everything put away until we're going to use it. So I like to make sure all my preferred items are put away so that there's no distractions when we're communicating with one another, and we can use, we can reward our positive behaviors by letting them then choose those activities that are preferred. So be aware, age, emotional state, and disability. These are all variables that need to be considered when building rapport, because it might change the level of how we communicate with them, how we're going to build rapport with them. So I'm going to get a little scientific. I was taught this in university, and it's really helped me understand how I should build my communication and what I should do with my children in Maxi Mind by knowing what level that they're operating on. So who is Piaget? So Piaget is a developmental psychologist, and he has this theory of intellectual development, and it's still used today in all kinds of branches of psychology and actually in education. So this is where I kind of apply it most at work. And this theory of cognitive development focuses on children from birth all the way into adolescence, and it characterizes them in 4 specific stages. And the main focuses in each stage are going to be language, moral memory, and reasoning development. So these 4 stages are sensory motor, and that's from birth to 2 years. We then go into pre-operational, which is 2 to 7 years. Concrete operational, which is ages 7 to 11. And then lastly, we have the formal operational stage, and that's from 11 years all the way into adolescence, into adulthood. So why am I talking about these stages? So in the sensory motor stage, it's important to know that I'm not going to kind of go into it too much because it is such a young age. But we do have to keep it in mind, because sometimes maybe our clients are operating a little bit lower, especially if they're coming to us, they're 4 or 5 years old. They might developmentally be at this age. So it's important to understand what is categorized in this stage, so you can use that into your sessions to build a relationship with them. But one of the main highlights of this stage is that at this age, the children are learning through their experiences, and they're going to go through those trial and error opportunities. And the goal of this stage is to understand object permanence. So knowing that an object is going to still exist even when you can't see it or it's being hidden. In the next stage, in the pre-operational stage, it's for children age 2 to 7. And this is where memory and imagination development are huge. So at this age, children are super egocentric, and they have difficulty understanding viewpoints that are outside of their own. And they're also very intuitive. They act very intuitively. So it's important to note that and always be aware of children of this age. Watch how they operate, watch what they connect with, watch what they gravitate to. Often without language, you can see what they're into. And at this stage, it's important to attach meaning to objects with language. So they start learning to think about things symbolically. For example, a lot of younger children, they'll pretend to cook food in a little play kitchen, or they'll use dirt and mud to make food. Like I was so big on mud pies, or maybe using like a wooden block as a phone. Those are all representations at this stage of the pre-operational stage. The next one is concrete operational. So ages 7 to 11, the children start to think more logically, more methodically. They're able to focus a bit more, and they're able to start focusing on different components, right? Many parts of the problem. So if something happens, they know this, and this happened before, and this is what happens after, right? And the main goal at this stage is that they're starting to work things out in their head, and that's what we call operational thought. And usually they're able to solve problems without physically encountering the things in real life. So it's constant, it's mental. And lastly, this stage is this is the formal operational, from 11 into adulthood. And the milestone at this stage is that they're able to use symbols to understand abstract concepts. They're able to know the outcome of a particular action, right? That self-regulation is stronger. They're able to think of different hypotheses, right? Using previous knowledge. And equally, when you're building rapport, once you've developed that foundation of rapport, you could continue to build on top of it. And that's just like this, it doesn't just stop, right? The stages don't just stop. You keep building and everybody changes, but it doesn't change how it was ever acquired or understood. Everyone's gonna kind of hit these milestones. And just like rapport, you're just gonna keep building when you are at that last stage. And you're gonna rely on your experiences and that level of understanding of the person you are and who you're communicating with to continue to build trust and mutual respect. So the reason I brought in these stages is because I use them in my Maxi Mind sessions. And at the root of it, when you think about it, it's about recognizing the stage that the child's currently in so that you're catering to that developmental level. As Maxi Mind coaches, we can provide our clients, obviously, with different experiences or ways to explore our home environment, encouraging them to explore their environment, manipulate objects, right, using the LBP and ILS programs, encouraging them to think of symbols more abstractly, developing their own hypothesis of certain outcomes in our programming can help them gain understanding of different concepts in a hands-on way. And that's what our program is. It's very hands-on. So I'm going to show you some ways that you can cater to their specific learning style in each stage. So it'll kind of make a little bit more sense why I brought it up. So in the sensory motor stage, so I want you to keep in mind, we don't have clients this young. However, developmentally, we want to keep that in mind, right? That's one of the variables. They might need these strategies because they're operating in this stage, even though their age is not in this stage. So in this stage, we want to use like real life objects, right? In our play activities. We want to allow them to manipulate the objects that they're interacting with to see if they can figure out how they work. What is the purpose for them? For the ILS program, there's some breathing activities, right? So we can use these real life objects to help facilitate the action of breathing. And this helps further connect their brain and body, right? You can use objects like a breathing ball. I love this one. It's such a physical manipulation, but it's so concise to the point. It helps with their focus and attention, but really makes that skill concrete. You could also use for the figure 8 breathing, right? That's actually an activity in the program, but sometimes they're not able to just do it in the air. So following it, it's got the verbal prompts in there, can really help with that activity. Or using a balloon, right? We blow out the balloon and then the balloon deflates. That helps facilitate those breathing activities. So also in the sensory motor stage, you want to teach them how to bounce the ball properly, right? Maybe roll the ball before encouraging them to catch it. Like see where their skills are at, their fine motor skills and all that. And this over time will help increase their motor coordination and their fine motor skills. Use balls of different shapes, right? Different shapes, different sizes, not shapes, sizes. A ball's a ball, but maybe use a textured ball if they have trouble gripping the ball, right? Or using the ball with the holes in it so that they're able to throw it a little bit easier Use big balls for children whose motor abilities are a little bit lower. Use smaller balls for people who have better gross motor skills. Maybe, they play baseball, so they've got that grip, they've got that fine motor coordination. And eventually, if you start really big, try to downsize as you go on, as you progress through your sessions, right? Because the coordination will increase. You could also incorporate in this stage, you can incorporate movement activities. I like to incorporate yoga, maybe some stretching, right? Like reaching, stretching, grasping. These are all important skills that we use in our program. So giving, the opportunity to do yoga or dancing can help with these skills that'll be helpful in your sessions when you're doing your programming. And that's for the sensory motor stage. So for the next one, still in the stage, some of our children are going to be more sensory. They're going to need to use their senses to explore their environment. So making sure that you have activities that can help with this, whether it's slime, putty, anything where they can really get their hands in on is nice at this stage. So they don't have to developmentally be, 0 to 2 years old to have these activities. That's just something you're going to learn from that baseline data, and that's going to help build a connection with them, right? You're really harnessing your activities into their preferred likes and what their personality is all about. So of course, lastly, which I've touched a bunch on, is that schedule, right? It's so important to be able to have these routines and schedules to build consistency and following those expectations. That can just help with the session, the flow of the session. Next, we could go right into pre-operational. So in this stage, the children are going to be learning their best by doing. So allowing them to actively interact with all these activities in their environment is so important. You can include books, games, just other objects to help form concrete ideas. It's a good example when you're teaching them to express emotion. You can use books that explain the emotions, visual aids, like the charts. And even using a mirror. I love having a mirror on handy so that you can see and mimic the emotion, just to help form that concrete understanding. Sometimes their face might not match with the emotion that they're presenting. So you want to make sure you're teaching them what it looks like, what it feels like. And modeling is also very important at this stage. For this age group, modeling the action with the object that they're supposed to be using, especially in the ILS and LBP programs, can help them better understand the task. Sometimes just verbalizing, say, I want you to do this, 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 and this, it gets lost in translation. And some of them might need that hand over hand prompting when you're first explaining it, right? Until they finally get it. So encourage them to ask questions about the object. Have them explore each object that they're coming into contact with and ask questions about it. When we use the pendulum ball, we use it for so many different things, right? Allowing them to come up with their own ideas of how to use the pendulum ball is a fun idea too, that you can incorporate in this stage, because it facilitates that brainstorming and they're forming their own ideas about the objects that they're interacting with in their environment. Next, we have concrete operational, so that third stage. So this is a really good stage. It's my favorite if I'm going to pick one, because they're starting to work out various problems and solutions in their heads, right? It's a really good time for them to test their attention, their memory. We want to build on that in our program, right? So we're going to be able to put it to test in this stage. So once they've completed a set a few times, I like to have them try to teach it back to me. Have them explain it to me, be that teacher role. Show me what step comes next. Like, can you remember how we do this? Maybe when you're doing all those stages, you're at stage 10. We haven't touched stage 1 in a long time, or set 1, right? So can you remember what we did? Take a look at the pictures. Can you remember how we operate and how we do this? It's a really fun opportunity for them to get really involved in the session, and it helps them connect to the program, right? And they're using these concrete skills, these concrete operational skills while they're doing it. I like to focus on this part of the stage, open-ended questions. That's going to help generate, that problem solving. So you could easily say, after this step, what comes next? Or could you add another step that could challenge you? What would you do? Another great way at this stage to keep their brains kind of working in that analytical thinking mode is by incorporating brain breaks or brain teasers into your session. You don't have to put these into your schedule. You just kind of use them as they pop up. So when you're maybe setting up for another activity, have them step away and do a little brain break activity, right? Maybe they're playing Rush Hour to help facilitate ways of thinking ahead, right? They're using those analytical thinking skills, and they're not just doing nothing, when you're trying to set up for a new activity or whatever it may be. And then when they're finished that, they could come back right back into their session, right? Brain breaks are such a good way of breaking up the program, and you could also use them as a coping mechanism, right? If they start getting frustrated or they're feeling too challenged by an activity, having them just step away, do this like fun little brain teaser, puts their brains in a different way of thinking. Usually it's a great distraction, and they don't carry on that frustration into that next transition after the brain break. And it's the best. So lastly, we have the formal operational, right? And that's going to be for our clients who are older, they've already worked their way through the other stages, or, they're just at that level where they're able to explain concepts and they're using that analytical thinking to their advantage. So for this stage, I really heavily rely on visual aids to keep them encouraged and connected to the activities that I'm using. As you can see, the zones of regulation is a little different. It's not just pictures, it's actually having words on the paper. It's step by step, telling them what they need to do, how they might be feeling. We're at the formal operational stage where they're able to explain those concepts, right? So they should be able to say, I'm sad because, and this is what I can do to help myself. So yeah, using those visual aids, also too, like the figure eight breathing it's great to constantly use. I use it as a coping skill as well, especially if they're feeling a little defeated. Why don't you just go over there, take some time, do some deep breaths, use the ball, right? So this is just a quick, easy way to facilitate that for this stage. Okay. So going through those stages was really important for me to kind of put in here, because everybody has the top tips for how we're going to build these connections, but ensuring that you know what level and what stage they're at will allow you to kind of pick and choose which of these strategies are going to be most appropriate, right? Especially when I look at number 5, right? Monitoring their emotions. You want to make sure that you're hitting the right stage. You're not going to give a child this, zones of regulation strategy if it's not going to work for them. Maybe developmentally, they're not at that stage and they're not able to put those connections together. So that was just a tip for that. But these are my pro tips to build that meaningful connection. And it starts with psychological safety. So there's plenty of ways that you can build psychological safety, but one of the easiest ways is to encourage your children to ask questions, share their ideas, and just be consistently approachable and calm when they do it, right? Allowing those check-ins can help build psychological safety. And that's why I personally find it's best to carve out, at least 5 to 10 minutes of that daily connection time in the start of your session. Because just starting your session off by chatting and getting to hear about their day helps build that connection between the two of you. And more importantly, it just allows the child to feel heard. They know that they're there to improve themselves, right? They're there for a reason. However, they should never feel like a project. Ideally, we want all of our conversations to be sunshines and rainbows, but sometimes our clients are going to have really hard days. And I personally think don't be afraid to be a little bit vulnerable, right? Without going too much into personal detail, just listening to them and saying, you know what, sometimes I feel that way too. And then telling them a short little story of your own experiences, your own faults, worries, and fears helps them feel more connected to us. And it shows empathy, which obviously is going to build that connection a little deeper, right? Our job isn't to determine if their problems are big enough to matter. Our job is to listen without judgment. And we want to provide them a safe space so that they can share how they're feeling and they'll want to keep coming back, right? It's therapy, but they want to keep coming. So on a similar note to that, paying attention to their traits and interests can also make them feel heard and make them feel seen, right? They don't have to always use words. Just bonding with what they like is a way to build psychological safety too. And it can be as easy as, Caitlin, I know you love dinosaurs. Which dinosaur is your favorite? Just noticing those interests can make a huge difference and can help with their confidence levels too. So next we want to use encouraging words. And that's so important because, you know, young people face so many challenges sometimes during the day, and a lot of it can be really small things, but they have just such a big impact on them because they don't understand yet, right? They haven't worked through that concrete operational stage where they're able to see things and analyze each section of it, right? They just have experience like my friend is playing with another friend and it's like the world is ending. And they could be struggling with a bunch of things, right? Maybe it's the schoolwork, maybe it's too hard, maybe they're feeling left out by their friends, maybe they're dealing with difficult family situations, maybe there was a death in the family, maybe their parents are fighting, right? There's all these challenges, so it's easy for a child when they're experiencing this to lose sight of their worth and their potential. And that's why it's so important when they come into our care to just load them with encouragement on a daily basis. Just a few words can give that child the boost that they need to keep going. And it helps melt away that stress, right? Makes them feel valued. It makes them feel capable. And sometimes, you know, the world's very harsh and unforgiving. So encouraging kids is one of the most powerful things we can do. And it's one of the easiest things that we can do. It lets them know that they're not alone, and it lets them know that somebody cares about them. So I like to build this into my sessions by, you know, like printing out coloring sheets with words of encouragement that they could color in their free time, or I could use as a coping skill if they're feeling, you know, stressed or frustrated. You know, just having something with like flowers and positive phrases can help. It's just an easy way to incorporate that into your session. But obviously, your words, your language is the most important. Equally important is obviously to have rules. But this is where the material gets a little bit heavy because we want to talk to that consistency, right? The rules, the boundaries, and the kids absolutely need boundaries, and it's so important to have them. But you got to pick and choose your rules, right? It's not the more rules, the better, because if you just throw a kid in with too many rules, then they stop trying to walk in between the fine lines that you made for them, and it becomes, you don't want to power struggle, right? You don't want to make your life unnecessarily difficult by having all these rules. So be concise, be clear with which rules you're going to put in place, and make sure that you don't apologize for those rules, right? You shouldn't have to constantly explain them. You don't want to get caught in that spiral of being argumentative, right? If you feel confident that your rules are reasonable and fair, just make sure you stick to them and make sure the child knows so that you can help kind of, you know, scare off those negative behaviors by reinforcing the rules because the child already knows them. We're reinforcing expectations because there's rules everywhere in life, right? So there should be rules inside your home too. I touched on this earlier, so I'll kind of explain what I mean by not monitoring their emotions. So you want to make sure you allow the children to be human, and obviously we have a wide range of feelings. And while it's perfectly reasonable to have those behavior-based rules, such as like no swearing, right? If that's important to you, it would be damaging to have a rule that your children aren't allowed to be angry or annoyed. So everyone gets angry, everyone gets sad, annoyed, and frustrated. and emotions are normal, right? And they aren't actually the problem. So I personally believe that our feelings don't need to be kind of stuffed down, and but they shouldn't determine our behavior. So feelings and actions are two different things, and rules need to be based on the actions, not the feelings. But of course, managing our own feelings, sometimes we get frustrated, right? No matter how great we are at dealing with kids, most kids are still going to flip out occasionally, right? The most important thing that we can remember to do when a child is flipping out, which was, either crying, screaming, and throwing a tantrum, is that during these episodes, logic is not going to work. And losing your cool is not going to work either. The reason logic won't work is because during an emotional overload, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's the logical part, is literally offline. It's like, goodbye, I'm offline, not working, not operating properly. And this happens to us as adults too. So the best thing that we can do when a child is flipping out is to help them get back into that calm state first, because you're teaching them how to self-regulate, right? Maybe they need just a drink of water. Maybe you need to go to the kitchen, take a drink of water. Whatever coping skill you choose, this is a good opportunity to kind of shift into their sympathetic side. And after a minute or two of using these coping skills, you could ask them something distracting, like, hey, did you ever notice, how many windows are in my house? Have you tried counting how many windows are in my house? These distractions can help turn their brain back online, and get them thinking again, but not thinking about what it was that made them upset. So it kind of brings them back into their present, right? Maybe they're sitting down, they're closing their eyes, and you have them, what can you hear? Open up a window. What do you hear outside? What do you smell, right? Activating those senses too. And once they've settled, then you could kind of have a conversation about what it is and reinforcing those rules, right? But sometimes that's not necessary. You just move on. It's up to you to decide how much you want to kind of address with that. And lastly, as we all love, those praises, we want to praise their qualities that they're growing. So constantly praising them for innate qualities, like you're so pretty or you're so smart, right? You're lacking the focus on the skills that they're actually trying to build. And you don't want them to rely on that. You don't want them to rely on, oh, I'm so pretty, I'm so smart. You want them to rely on those skills, like I'm a hard worker, if a child is constantly told they're smart, like what happens after they fail an exam? They're going to feel defeated, right? Or if somebody does better than them in a test, all those negative feelings are going to come up by that verbiage, right? So what we want to do is be able to praise them on their efforts, right? Not what's kind of special about them in these more physical qualities, stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with complimenting a child, for those innate qualities. But it's just much better, especially in, like a therapeutic setting, for kids to focus on the qualities that they have, this level of control over. And overall, by treating kids as individuals, ensuring that we make sure we tend to our own state of mind and focusing on those, behavior-based rules and consistency, we can build rapport with kids just by making sure that these boundaries are in place. So I talked about my golden rule. I'm almost done. These are just quick, 10 minutes or less that you can incorporate into your sessions to help build that connection. Kind of some of them, don't even necessarily need words and talking, but you're going to build that connection by engaging in these types of activities. I like to say they're kid tested, coach approved, because I wouldn't be presenting them if I didn't know that, if they don't work. So they do work. Dancing is a really fun one, right? It never ceases to generate smiles and laughter, just being funny and goofy, right? You could start a session off by dancing or end a session off with a dance video that you let them choose. It's just fun. It's easy. You're obviously incorporating those motor skills, building the connection just by having fun, and maybe even create your own special dance. It's a fun activity. We touched on these earlier, the sensory activities. So obviously they're a great opportunity to actually expand the oral language, because sensory activities have been proven to build nerve connections in the brain. It encourages learning through exploration, through curiosity, right? Working together, cooperation, maybe you're problem solving some things. Also, you can use them as a coping skill, right? So these are just some of the activities that I use. If you look to the glitter jar, I have a fun little analogy that I always use with my clients. It's honestly, this is my one strategy that works every single time. Whether they're frustrated, they're feeling defeated, they're feeling sad. It's a great way to connect the brain to the body by having them shake this jar, right? And once it's all shaken up, you see the glitter kind of swirling around. I let them know that when we're upset or frustrated or sad, whatever they're feeling, right, relate to that emotion, our brains go into overdrive, right? We can't think clearly. We're not focused. So it's like that glitter swirling around. It's a little manic, right? It's all over the place. But eventually, as you're holding the jar, the glitter starts to dissipate. The glitter goes all the way to the bottom and everything is clear again. So I always like to say that's how your brain is, right? When we're frustrated or upset, the glitter swirling around, our brains are in overload. But eventually, when we pick a strategy to help us get back into that okay zone, we stop feeling that frustration anymore and our brains calm down. So it's a great learning opportunity to use in a sensory activity too. And you incorporate building one together, right? Make a jar that they could have at home or in session. You could incorporate that as an activity, and that'll help build your relationship as well. Reading is another quick and easy opportunity. Sometimes parents might have, a learning goal that they want their child to read better, but I like to make sure that the reading is meaningful. So building in the time to read these kind of social stories that help build self-regulation can actually help reduce stress. Obviously it builds their level of understanding. It might match to their goals that you've created. And that can include, using the books that help them identify emotions, help them problem solve. There's the calm down jar. I actually have the story and we go through it together, and it's a nice activity because they learn what it's for, build self-regulation, and it just hits the point that you're trying to get across to them. Turn-taking games is super effective. You want to make sure that you're picking the right games, obviously based on their interests. But this is a perfect area of connecting. So obviously learning to take turns is such an essential skill, and it helps them develop their social competence, their self-regulation, their communication skills. It's also important to build on that self-regulation because it allows them to understand the importance of sharing, right? Waiting patiently, listening actively, which are all skills that we use in our Maxi Mind program. And lastly, creating. Why not create some art together, right? Use this as an opportunity to build something together. Since children love to manipulate materials, whatever they like, build it into the session. They will feel such a great sense of achievement once it's all done. And constructive play, helps children make sense of their world, and it enhances their problem solving skills, right? I love making sure that we make birthday cards for friends, family members or friends with my students. It's a fun little activity that helps them connect with you, and it's really nice for them to see that you remember that it was somebody's birthday. They'll feel more connected to you. So lastly, and most importantly, is building that relationship with the parents, right? We've spent such a great deal of time talking about how to build connections with kids, but it's equally important to build a connection with the parents as well. You want them to feel like they're an important factor in this program, and you want them to feel connected to you and the program. So research shows that when a partnership approach between parents and those coaches, those teachers in their lives is there, the children's work habits and their attitudes will increase. They start doing better in school, right? Their grades improve. They start doing better at home. So they demonstrate better social skills. there's less behavior problems and a greater ability to adapt to situations that they might be uncomfortable with, right? They're starting to get along a little bit more. And that just comes with, building a relationship with their parents and communicating effectively with one another. So imagine you could just help enhance their skills, all these skills, just by having a good relationship with their trusted caregiver, right? So there are 3 C's in this. So the 3 components are communication, consistency, and commitment and collaboration. So obviously when we talk about communication, it's important to have communication between your home and obviously the child's home. And like any relationship in life, communication between 2 people is built, right? Communicating with your child's parent early on before starting the sessions, like I mentioned before, helps kind of set the tone for communication and let them know, what you plan to provide for their child. Ask them about their child's personality and those traits, right? Draft up those strategies and those goals that you're going to hit. But it's also important to address how you're going to communicate. Are you emailing? Are you texting? Are you doing it through phone calls? Do they prefer face-to-face when they're picking up their child at the door? You have to kind of establish those lines of communication and making sure that your communication is open, it's clear, constructive, and it works on your time, right? You don't want a parent hitting you up at 11 p.m. on a Saturday to talk about their child. You want to create those boundaries for communication. And I like to include my parents into 3 sessions. And I bridge this into the relationship building with them. So we have, our first session, which is when they come in, they see, all the equipment, we learn about each other, we talk about goals. I also have them come in, like the midway point, I call it like my midterm evaluation. They could see how the child is interacting with the objects and what they're learning to do, what goals they've been working on, what goals they've completed. And then lastly, they come in for the final session, and that's the nicest one because they get to kind of see how their child started through all of it, how they've progressed, and then where they ended up, right? If they feel really involved through this like tangible experience, they feel really good about the program and they feel really good about you as a coach. And that's essentially what it's all about, right? The second is consistency. And that's, Lorenzo, come here. Yeah, come here. If we talk about consistency, he is consistently barking at the door. So when we talk about consistency here, this involves like the opportunities and experiences that you provide at home, right? You can talk about and suggest ways of working with the child at home and their learning, and you can build on those goals, those home goals that they've created with their parents. It could also include, being consistent with your routines, especially routines at home. You could help the parents establish routines for homework, which would be, establishing a set time, a quiet place. You could help by implementing visual schedules that would help with time management and organization, or you could even offer activities or materials that help develop, their connections. Have you ever tried a family game night, right? I always ask that to my parents, and most of the time they say, yeah, we do it every here and there. But if they consistently do it, then they're creating those moments of bonding with their child, right? So I love when my kids come in and they know Friday is, family game night, and they'll pick a game that I have, bring it home, play it, and then return it, right? And that way they're constantly trying something new. You're not asking parents to go out of pocket to pay for all these different games, but you're getting the child really excited about these areas of connecting with their parents, right? And consistency also means that you talk about methods and strategies that you're using with your child, with the parents. You're keeping them on that same page, right, when it comes to the expectations for the program. And having this partnership sends a consistent and clear message to the child that lets them know that you are in this together with them, with their parents, and you're there to support their learning. Lastly is collaboration, or commitment and collaboration, right? So obviously, this is one of the biggest ones. Knowing that you're there for the child, that you're going to consistently commit to being there. Um, Sometimes you could reiterate this by when a child has a couple days off, right? Sometimes they're sick, sometimes you're but staying committed to the process and those goals can help can help build that relationship and allow the parent to feel that what they signed up for is going to benefit them and it's going to benefit their child. So my last pro tips for the parent version, and then you guys can get out of here, is one, talking about the concerns when they come up, right? The problems don't just go away on their own. And sometimes when you leave them to escalate, they can be more difficult to repair later. So it's important to make sure you prepare yourself for conversations that kind of are around difficult issues. Not everything's going to be easy. Sometimes, you know, a child displays behavior that's hard to talk about, or maybe they mentioned something when they were chatting with you that you definitely want to address with the parent. And that's just because, you know, sometimes it's hard. Parents feel upset too, right? And they could feel stressed out about these conversations. So it's important to think ahead what you want to say, and be sensitive and respectful when you say it, right? That just ensures that the discussion goes well. Next is you want to talk about those positive experiences, right? So you want to talk about the positives and the negatives, right? When you're talking about the negatives, you really want to make sure that when you're being sensitive, right? And you want to explain what you think contributed either to that behavior that you saw, right? It can help you and the parent try to figure out a way of changing the behavior. So next we can do is just check with the parents what they think about it. Do they think it's that serious? You know, asking those questions, not assuming, right? Maybe they don't think it's a big deal that the child is doing this, right? So always check what they think about the issue, and remember that perceptions of what's appropriate differ between cultures, context, right? So we always want to ask those questions. And you could easily do that by saying, you know, like, how does your family handle it when this happens, right? What are your thoughts on, you know, lying, not telling the truth, stuff like that. That's just a little example. And of course, you're going to offer like realistic strategies, right, for each family. So going into those, it's easier to express and communicate those positive experiences than it is the negative ones, right? But don't just contact parents about problems or challenging behaviors. You want to connect with them and communicate when positive things happen, right? You want to celebrate those moments because achieving a learning outcome or, you know, hitting a milestone or reaching those goals is so important to celebrate as well. And the parents feel really, really good to hear the successes of their child. You also want to make sure when you are addressing the concerns that you have a problem solving approach, right? You're identifying what the problem is. You're trying to brainstorm as many solutions as possible. You're kind of going through the pros and cons, right? And you're going to decide together a solution to try, or maybe it's solely up to the parent and they want to tackle this at home, right? But brainstorming together and having them as part of that process is important because they're going to feel supported. And then the next stage would obviously putting that solution in action and then reviewing it. Is it working? Did the behavior stop? Did it, did it escalate? Did it de-escalate? Like what happened? That way you have that kind of talking point of reaching out to the parent again on this situation. Next, we want to make sure we're talking to them, you know, clearly, respectfully, and you're being really considerate. You want to use everyday language that they can understand. You don't want to muddle it with professional jargon. You know, they're just not going to get it. You know, talking to them, oh, did you know they hit ILS at 6, blah, 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 blah. You just want to explain it, right? So they can feel more involved in the session. And just kind of think before you speak. That's like the Genevieve rule, right? When you're talking to the parents about more sensitive or difficult issues, right? So finding those positives, being open and honest, giving them accurate information of what you are observing, right, in your session, and asking for their input, right? That's what's really important, because it lets the parents make the decisions. You're suggesting the ideas, but it's up for them to decide what comes next, right? When it comes to changing behaviors, you can ask to try a behavior chart, right? And seeing if that's a strategy that's actually going to work at home, or if that's a strategy that's only going to work in your session. And if you feel that it might not work at home, try it in your session so that you can observe and see what happens and what the outcomes are, so that you can bridge that then to the parents and say, you know what, we've tried it here. I can teach you the steps and you could try it at home. And that way you're kind of creating those strategies together, right? And building it beyond the session. And if you're not sure what to say or how to say it, just think about it before communicating things with them. And that's for the more difficult stuff, right? And obviously, lastly, is being an active listener. We all do it every day. You know, you guys are doing it right now, listening to me. And that's really the foundation of effective communication, right? When you listen well, you get more information, and you also get the full benefit of getting some in-depth knowledge of the children you're working with through the parents, just by listening to how they talk about them and what they say about them. And actively listening just helps the parents see that you value their opinions and their experiences, right? And you're going to take what they say seriously. So to put it all in a pretty little bow, we're going to wrap up rapport, right? It's been a lot of information. I hope that you guys can take away some of the strategies. I'm hoping it's a lot of information, but you're able to kind of see how I run my sessions and what my core values are, and how I build relationships with my kids and their parents as well. Because developing and building rapport isn't just about pleasing people. It's not about making them happy all the time. Although we as coaches strive to make sure all of our children are happy, it's not achieved through inconsistency, right? Just to please each and every person. What matters the most is having that consistency in your values, making sure that you're establishing those clear values and expectations for all your interactions within your home, and you keep true to them. Children will respect this. They will value that you set boundaries and respect your expectations. And that is what's going to build trust, right? Taking time to engage with your individuals in your space will pay twofold. By spending the time understanding your client's interests, you're developing confidence and trust, and that rapport starts to blossom. It's not the only thing that makes learning more engaging, but it makes it more enjoyable, right? For children and for yourself. A good rapport can provide a huge boost in mental well-being and create like a cyclic effect, right? We develop these healthy relationships. We feel confident. We feel happy. We want to try new things. We're feeling a sense of achievement, and we all experience these positive things. And we want to surround ourselves with relationships that feel them as well, right? We want to teach people like, hey, you can feel what I feel like. It feels so great. And that's where that circle comes in, is we're constantly moving in through it. And no matter what relationship we get into, or, you know, your sessions end, you've built that rapport, and it just keeps going round and round, right? The process continues beyond the sessions and into our relationships with others and into our relationships with ourselves. And I think that is the most important thing, is having this relationship not only benefits the children, building rapport benefits, you know, the children, the parents, and us in the long term.